In the international development community, the phrase "made in Norway" is a familiar one, as community development programs designed and executed from this country have long been the hallmark of Norway's presence on the global stage. Thank you, Board, and thank you, NHO, for hosting this important gathering. I'd also like to acknowledge Prime Minister Erna Solberg for your leadership, both on a global and on a local level. Thank you for everything that you do. Today, I'm excited to share with you our goal to build the largest possible movement to tackle the world's greatest challenges, and the pivotal role the private sector can play in this important endeavor. We wholeheartedly believe that we don't have to accept global inequality, inadequate or non-existent healthcare and education for millions, or the unequal, often degrading treatment of women and girls as beyond our capacity to fix. These crises didn't emerge in a vacuum. We're not hapless victims of fate. Over millions of years, and hundreds of years in particular, in ways big and small, the actions of policymakers have created the world in which we find ourselves. And at Global Citizen, we live by the creed that when humans are responsible for creating these crises, it follows that we must have it within ourselves the power to also resolve them. We work across 5 key issue areas. Firstly, we focus on gender equality and the empowerment of girls and women. Secondly, we look at education and global education. Thirdly, we focus on food and hunger, water and sanitation, and global health. These are systemic issues embedded in the social, political, and economic fabric, unfair and unjust, but not inevitable. They're not going to be solved unless we change the systems that keep people poor. Now, there's no denying the short-term good that an individual can do by donating their money or volunteering their time. But in the scope of sustainable change, we're talking about Band-Aids for bullet wounds. See, total philanthropic investment into those 5 issue areas equals a mere $60 billion per annum, $200 billion short of what it would actually take to address those 5 issues on an annual basis. $200 billion seems like a huge gap, and it is. But it's only 2/3 of the market cap of Facebook. It's less than 1/3 of what the US spends in military spending in a single financial year, and it's less than 1/40th of what the world spent on bailing out failed banks and car companies in the 2009 financial crisis, a whopping $8 trillion. This will not be solved through a series of black tie gala dinners. Both the political and the economic situation must be part of the solution. And with Global Citizen, we've created one of the fastest growing, most engaged social impact platforms in the world. And through the powerful activism of our now 8 million members, we've managed to score some big policy wins. We helped pass the Global Food Security Act that President Obama signed into legislation last summer. And in November of last year, we launched a year-long campaign in India where actions of over 500,000 global citizens in India saw financial commitments totaling more than $6 billion to education, gender equality, and water and sanitation. All told, our campaigns run over the last 6 years will positively affect the lives of some 750 million people. But with 700 million people still living in extreme poverty, the time for action is now. I'd like to take you behind the scenes of one of our major campaigns and see the impact that ordinary citizens like you and I can have. See, in 2015, the world came together for the first time and agreed upon the 17 Sustainable Development Goals designed to end extreme poverty, reduce inequality, and tackle climate change. These goals serve as a starting point when we determine the focus of our advocacy. Last year, in response to the current geopolitical environment, our policy team made the decision to focus strategically on the issue of education, because we knew that 125 million children are currently out of school. We also knew that education was the poor cousin of global development. You can see here that total aid has increased by 24% since 2008, yet aid to education has gone down by 19%, while aid to health has gone up 58%. We need renewed enthusiasm by donors to get children educated. If the current trend continues, 15 million girls and 10 million boys will never set foot inside a classroom. In search of a solution, we set our eyes on Norway. Why Norway? Well, we focused on Norway not because the country was failing to do their part, but precisely the opposite. Because when it comes to the fight to end extreme poverty, there are few countries in the world more committed and more generous than Norway. This legacy is embodied by Prime Minister Solberg's own personal dedication to her role as co-chair of the SDG Advocates Group, alongside the likes of Muhammad Yunus and Jack Ma. Our thinking was if this government could commit even more resources, $100 million to be precise, to global education, then the rest of the donor countries would likely follow Norway's lead. So we started working with comedian and late-night host Stephen Colbert, himself a passionate advocate for education. We explained to him the merits of this strategy, and he mixed a serious message with some lighthearted humor. He even ate a plate of lutefisk to hammer home the point. This is what he had to say. Check this out.
We need the Global Partnership for Education to get enough cash to disperse at least $15 billion a year by 2020. Here's how we're going to get this done. We're using Twitter to invade Norway. Okay, technically, we're sending tweets to Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg. You see, Norway is a leader in funding education worldwide, and if they agree to increase their support for the Global Partnership for Education, the rest of the world will follow. Norway has always been a trendsetter. I mean, just look at the Vikings. They were into ridiculous beards way before Brooklyn. So we're asking Norway to give $100 million a year for the next 5 years. And to help guarantee education for all, register to be a global citizen on the website and tweet at Erna Solberg and ask her politely to increase funding for the Global Partnership for Education using the hashtag #EducationForAll.
Now, I was on a flight to Oslo when Colbert released his video message, so I missed the initial reaction on social media, but I turned on my phone when I landed, and I received an influx of voicemails and messages from friends here in Oslo, including a message from the Prime Minister's office. It was clear that Stephen's video message had hit home. The hashtag #EducationForAll had started trending all around the world, but we weren't sure whether we would actually achieve our policy outcomes, which is so important. We knew that Prime Minister Solberg at the time, who was campaigning in local elections, was facing domestic challenges such as a collapse in oil revenues, a devaluation of the krona, all of which makes it hard to focus on global issues. We met with the Prime Minister, who made it clear that her Twitter feed had indeed been overrun by messages from global citizens both here in Norway and all around the world. We spent over an hour together brainstorming how we could meet the education challenge. And the Prime Minister, to her credit, enthusiastically agreed to post a video response to Stephen Colbert's Twitter invasion and speak at the Global Citizen Festival, and to her amazing credit, write to other world leaders and encourage them to step up to the global education challenge. This is what she had to say.
Dear Stephen Colbert, thank you for your powerful message. You managed to clog my Twitter feed. My government is massively increasing our support to global education.
We can use the Global Citizen Festival as our collective megaphone to call for a massive increase in educational funding. Norway is doubling its contribution to global education, including to the Global Programme for Education, over the 4-year period since my government took office.
As a result of the Prime Minister's commitment, by the end of this year, Norway's annual contribution to the Global Partnership for Education will reach close to $100 million, double what it was 4 years ago. Congratulations to you. You see, action is our currency. Global Citizen is not interested in awareness for the sake of awareness. We insist on accountability from leaders both in developed and in emerging markets. For example, in Tanzania, Global Citizen has been supporting local activists to campaign for the end of child marriage once and for all. Whether we succeed or not depends on persuading governments like Norway and Tanzania to take the steps necessary to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But we need more than just politicians, and we need more than just NGOs like ours. In the pursuit of these goals, business and the private sector must be a full partner, making the most of opportunities for innovation, investment, trade, and market expansion that accompany an expanded global south. In blunt terms, the Sustainable Development Goals will be dead on arrival without the enthusiastic participation of the private sector, from businesses small, medium, and large. And while there is no one-size-fits-all model to corporate engagement, good corporate citizenship can be founded on some immediate actions. Firstly, auditing value chains and operations to ensure the sustainable and ethical production of goods and services. Secondly, leveraging your core business for social change, and I've seen so many examples in agriculture, in pharmaceuticals, in telecommunications, in energy, in entertainment, where companies are actually using their main business to create social change. You can also engage your employee base, both as volunteers, but also as donors on a regular basis. You can even engage in impact investing, and some corporate citizens are using their own corporate voice to advocate for social change. And the data shows that the payoffs can be immediate. 73% of millennials will buy and pay more for sustainable goods and services. 58% of millennials would take a pay cut to work for a company with, quote, values like my own. And nearly 3/4 of millennials prefer to work for socially responsible companies. As encouraging as this is, we will never achieve the scale of the Sustainable Development Goals one business at a time. We need systemic change across the private sector as a whole. All of you in this room and the organizations you represent must be part of that change. Developing economies need investment as well as philanthropy, trade as much as aid. A sustained commitment based on the idea that we could be the first generation in all of human history to see an end to extreme poverty. But our work will mean nothing if we've failed to persuade decision makers that the consequences of inaction outweigh the cost to act. But that, my friends, is not the future that I see. Looking around this room, I see a private sector willing and eager to contribute, to be part of the solution. Despite the strange and uncertain political environment we live in, I see no shortage of political and business leaders still willing to do the right thing. Business alone cannot do it. Politicians alone cannot do it, nor can NGOs like ours. But all of us together, we can do it. Thank you for your time.